Office hours typically at, we were at college or university, we'd be sitting around and whatever pieces of discussion, reading, conversation experiences folk wanted to bring up, we would just kind of sit around and do that for a couple of hours. And that's what we do here. Now, what we're going to do now is add a feature as we open up 2022. And we know going forward, we have an Introduction to African American Studies class, one of a series of offerings being developed. And I've got the outline for that one already, and which will be available for people to take kind of at their pace. But since this is a living, dynamic space, I said, you know what? We're going to read this book. We'll read about a book a month. And the first books we will enter will be books that everybody in Nubia has. Because if you don't have a physical copy or a digital copy from somewhere else, we have the copies here. We've got Souls of Black Folk. But the first book that we're going to do, and this will be the book we do for the month of January, will be The Miseducation of the Negro. And we're going to start next week. We are going to read about, in order to get it done in 3 weeks, because this tonight we're just kind of beginning to talk about it. So we don't count tonight. This is introducing the idea. We're going to do approximately about 6 chapters a week. Now that sounds like a lot till you realize that The Miseducation of the Negro total, the book is just a little over 200 pages long. By the time you get to chapter 18, Higher Strivings in the Service of the Country, in fact, it's not 200 pages long. The print edition from 1933 is 199 pages, right at 200 pages. So that averages out to about maybe 3 dozen pages a week, 35, 40 pages a week, 40 pages top, about 6 chapters a week. The chapters are very small. And so we're going to start, as I said, with this book. We're going to do it for the month of January. I'll make a few major points, and then we'll open it up for jumping into the voice-to-voice conversation. And in the meantime, as we're doing it, folks can begin to fill up the chat. And here are the purposes. Because we're not just talking about the book now. We're going to bring Woodson into dialogue. Part of reading, a great deal of reading, in fact, the essence of reading is to bring ourselves in dialogue with those who have written, those who have spoken, those who have done these speeches. It's a speech act. So we're going to bring these things about in community. Woodson's going to join us for January. We're going to sit with Carter Woodson. And what better way to start? Because, of course, February is the beginning of the month that began with the week that Carter Woodson said we should pause and think about what we discussed the whole year. So we build our momentum now in January. And then we're going to engage in collective annotation. That's why this chat is so important. Observations from what people have read, making connections what people have read. People can link to notes they may have taken as they were doing the reading for the week. We're contemporizing it. How does this apply to what we're talking about now? We're going to model that in a second. A collective work. We're about to have a collective work. And of course, this will be the largest group to discuss the miseducation of the Negro, as far as I am aware, ever in one place. So if folks are not in Nubia, not in Knarrative, if you want to tell them, hey, this is their chance. This will be the largest group to ever engage in a collective reading of the Miseducation of the Negro. And everyone can and should participate, because the chat is going to be where most of the stuff is going. And I opened up my narrative screen here because, let me refresh here, because I started now in Nubia, and I'm going to make sure, yeah, there we go. Y'all give me about 3 seconds. Of course, this one. All right, here we go. Oh, yeah, I love it. Yeah, everybody's saying they love it. No, we definitely sitting at the feet. Woodson's in the room with us. Oh, we're going to model it tonight. So we'll devote about an hour to the text. We're about an hour of office hours. So from 8 to 9, we'll do this. Maybe I'll take 15, 20 minutes to make a couple of points from the week. And then the rest of the time is open dialogue, which may spill over. I expect it will spill over, but we'll see. So we just know. So so let me see. Anything else? Yeah, like a lot of the names we know: John Henry Clark, Nina Simone, you name it, Ella Jo Baker, Ida B. Wells, Carter G. Woodson. We know something about them, And in many ways, we use them as avatars. But the simple fact of the matter is, if we were to read, if everybody, I'm not talking about reading speed, I'm not talking about number of words per minute and all that kind of thing. My sister reminded me when I was home in November, she said, I remember when we were kids and you locked yourself in the back and said, everybody leave me alone. I'm going to try to teach myself how to speed read. Y'all remember Evelyn Wood's speed reading? The things used to come on TV and you hear them on the radio. Learn how to speed read. Take this seminar. And I begged my daddy, man, let me go to the seminar. And we didn't have that kind of money, but I remember my father let me go to one of those introductory seminars. It probably cost a nominal fee to get out. Sitting in the ballroom, he's having in the hotel ballroom. I'm a kid sitting in there, and I'm watching these people move their hands across the page. And then I left there. He said, "What'd you learn?" I said, "I learned I could teach myself that. That's just reading. I've been reading since I was a child, little child." So I remember that. And so, but this isn't about speed. What I'm about to say next. If we just devoted 30 minutes a day. 30 minutes a day to a text like this, or any text, we'd be able to complete, any one of us will be able to complete dozens of books a year. Double that time, just an hour a day. Most folk could probably read over 100 books. I'm talking about the big books, the telephone-sized books, the little books, and most people already know that. So tonight, we're going to undertake a simple demonstration of the power of the text. This is a book that we all know. This is a book that we took the time in Knarrative to have a conversation about, digitize, and it's there. So nobody has to go and buy a copy unless you just have a copy you want to go through. I like the physical book, but we got the digital version. So we're all set now. And then it's 20 after, so we haven't been doing a whole lot tonight. I just wanted to get that on the fan. So let's just preview what we're going to do. So here's the Miseducation of the Negro. The Associated Publishers Incorporated, 1538 9th Street, Northwest, Washington, D.C. The house that Woodson had these copies stored in is there now. The association has been in partnership with Omega Psi Phi, Woodson's fraternity, Omega Psi Phi. The National Park Service, it's on a historical site now. And we just passed Woodson's birthday, as we know. And Asala, the association, had a magnificent birthday celebration. They always do. This one was virtual. I joined hundreds of others and some of you all in the celebration. It's wonderful. Every year, and before COVID, and soon after, next December, we're going to claim it. We'll be back at the Woodson house and around the corner at the elementary school where they have the big gathering. And then, of course, there's the Carr Woodson statue right across the park facing the Phyllis Wheatley Y and the newly built Benjamin Banneker Academic High School. So that's a black row. And then you go across the street and you have Harambe School, the African Centered School. It don't get no blacker than that. A. Philip Randolph's house was down there. Georgia Douglas Johnson. I mean, just beautiful, beautiful space. At any rate, but the Associated Publishers was literally in the house. That's where the storehouse was. Langston Hughes writes about it. He worked for Woodson. So here's the foreword. Now, everyone will have read the front matter, which is the foreword, the introduction, and then we're going to go through chapter 6 for next week. Here's the table of contents. Everyone sees. You can pull up the digital if you want to pull it up while we're doing this. The foreword is very short. Starts on page V, Roman numerals, one page, 5. The introduction is on page IX, or 9, after the table of contents. And then we're going to do chapter 1, the seed of the trouble, pages 1 through 8. Chapter 2, how we missed the mark, pages 9 through 16. Chapter 3, how we drifted away from the truth, beginning on page 17, continuing through page 25. Chapter 4, education under outside control, beginning on page 26, going through page 37. Chapter 5, the failure to learn to make a living, page 38, going through page 51. Chapter 6, the educated Negro leaves the masses, page 52 to page 61. So many of the names we know are avatars. We kind of use them. We wear them. We rock. I mean, I rock as many as more as anybody. We rock them on shirts. We talk about the main facts of their lives. If we read 30 minutes a day, even an hour a day, but let's say just 30 minutes a day, we would get through book after book after book. And if we read 30 minutes a day, you'll be way past chapter 6 in your read or reread. For a lot of people, it's going to be a reread of the Miseducation, but this will be the first time that we get to sit in a group and think with Woodson. So let's preview what we're going to do by doing the foreword tonight. and I'll read it out loud. And by the way, if you're thinking about how this is going to work next week, we log on, we'll talk about a few things, then we'll go right into it. Folks who want to jump into the conversation voice to voice will line up like folks are doing now, and we'll have a conversation. If you want to quote from the book, fine. If you want to go line by line, fine. Folks in the chat, anywhere you want to go in the reading for the week, please drop your comments, drop your quotes, drop your observations in the chat. And as you're doing that, understand that what we want to do in this collective work, we're building a collective annotation. We're observing things Woodson said. We're making connections to things we observe in contemporary society. We're asking questions and answering them about the life and times of Woodson when he's writing. A lot of these things began as newspaper articles, and I'll give some background to that as we're getting into chapter by chapter. We're building a collective. We're writing a book while we're reading a book. This is very important. So let's go to Woodson here, the foreword. First paragraph that he writes. He says, the thoughts brought together in this volume have been expressed in recent addresses and articles written by the author. So these are many of these things he has said before. He's published them in a number of places. He published, as we talked about, in the Universal Negro Improvement Association's newspaper, the Negro World, Marcus Garvey's newspaper. But he also published a lot in the Black press. A very good book that talks about Woodson and the Black press is Bernice Morris, my friend Bernice Morris, who's at Marshall University in West Virginia. It's called Carr G. Woodson, History, the Black Press, and Public Relations. When you look at the digital copy on Knarrative, you'll hear me talk about a lot of the other books associated. But we're not talking now about scholars writing about Woodson. We're talking about having a conversation with Woodson. He's going to speak with us. Next sentence. From time to time, persons deeply interested in the point of view therein presented have requested that these comments on education be made available in book form. To supply this demand, this volume is given to the public. So he didn't set out to write this book. He had been writing, and then people have been talking back to him through writing and speaking, saying, man, you should get this together, man. We need to read all these in one place. Or what do you? So he says, okay, January 1933. It's finished. Let me give it to the world. Black-owned press, Black publisher, Black distribution network. Sound like Knarrative, except Knarrative is 2022. And the Associated Publishers from 1933 were doing the same work. This is why Clark told Khalifa, don't worry about it. Anybody can reprint it, and you seeing some white publishers doing that? So, there are all kinds of editions now. We're not talking about the white press. In fact, reading Woodson helps us understand why that's a mistake. Let's keep going. He says, in the preparation of the volume, the author has not followed in detail the productions upon which most of the book is based. Interesting. He says the aim is to set forth only the thought developed in passing from the one to the other. The language in some cases then is entirely new. So he said, I'm not just reprinting what I wrote. Much of it is. But as I was rereading things and putting them together, I said, no, let me add something here. Or let me make sure I'm not being redundant. Let me continue to think through these ideas. He goes on to say the language in some cases then is entirely new, and the work is not a collection of essays. Remember, we got the Souls of Black Folk in there too. So I read the Souls of Black Folk. Did you read it with 1,000 people or 800 people or 700 people or 1,500 people? Because as this grows, what we're doing, I was very serious 2 Marches ago, standing in the parking lot after COVID had shut down every university in the country, including the one I work at. And I said, we're going to jailbreak this Black university. We are going to completely destroy the mystique that you got to pay somebody $30, $40, $50, $60, $70,000 a year to do something that if you will build something to sustain yourself, we do collectively. And that everybody from the little children to the elders must participate in. That's why he did this work. Very deadly serious about that. Deadly serious about that. And Woodson was too, which is why the Apocrypha that is attested to Woodson and Sterling Brown, by the way, is that Woodson said, I went to Harvard. I got a PhD from Harvard, and I spent the rest of my life trying to unlearn what they taught me at Harvard. I mean, it's kind of a joke. My point is that we're going to strip the mystique off them places and leave it where it belongs, on the ground. Woodson says, in this way, repetition has been avoided except to emphasize the thesis which the author sustains. So he says, I'm going to give it to you straight, no chaser. I'm not going to repeat a lot except to sustain the thesis. And we'll close with this. This is the introduction. So we'll start next week, but let's just get a taste of what the ancestor is saying. Probably just about everybody in here has read this. Let's read it together tonight. Woodson says, herein are recorded, not opinions, but the reflections of one who for 40 years has participated in the education of the black, brown, yellow, and white races in both hemispheres and in tropical and temperate regions. That's the first sentence of the book. There may be one or two people in here who don't know that Carter Woodson spent time teaching in the Philippines, that Carr Woodson traveled regularly to Europe, that Carter Woodson taught high school, was a principal of a high school, that Carter Woodson got his first degree at Berea College, same place Bell Hooks was on faculty before she made transition, an interracial school in the South. So when Woodson says, what I'm about to tell y'all, there's not a race in the world that I haven't had engagement with and taught at one time or another. Woodson was in the Philippines at the time. The United States was trying to establish its empire of color in the hemisphere and had a heavy ass foot down there trying to colonize the Philippines. So Woodson had insight into how miseducation was being foisted on the Filipinos, y'all, by the U.S. military. It all finds its way into this book. So we know some of the common phrases. We know the name Carter Woodson, but now we're going to get the benefit of Woodson directly. Woodson goes on and says, such experience, too, has been with students in all grades, from the kindergarten to the university. Whew. My friend Nicole Jones got in trouble last week on Meet the Press. She says, I'm not a professional educator. And then the right wing came for her. If that had been Carter Woodson sitting there, he said, yeah, you gonna tell me? Okay, yeah, I taught kindergarten through college. What's your question, Chuck Todd? See, it's but you got to remember the history. You know what I'm saying? Don't go into a fight without all your bullets, because these people got all kind of armory. If you're gonna fight them, you need to bring all your ancestors with you. There was an answer to that question that Carter Woodson could have provided from the first damn page of the Miseducation. We continue. He says the author, moreover, has traveled around the world to observe not only modern school systems in various countries, but to study the special systems set up by private agencies and governments to educate the natives in their colonies and dependencies. Here we have the first line previewing the mess that we have today with CRT and all these private schools. Woodson's going to anticipate that in 1933. He goes on, some of these observations too have been checked against more recent studies on a later tour. So he's going back and over researching, right? He says, discussing herein the mistakes made in the education of the Negro, the writer frankly admits that he has committed some of these errors himself. Look at that. Woodson is saying, I ain't perfect. And any good teacher, many of y'all teachers, you know, we mess up every day. I tell my students every day, I apologize to y'all in advance. Let's get started. When semester starts on Wednesday night at the law school, I have class Wednesday night. And then next week with the undergraduates, first thing I'm going to say is I'm apologizing in advance for the mistakes I'm about to make. Jacques Berliner Blau, in a book that he wrote. Oh, what was the name of Berliner Blau's book? I see it in my face. He did, in my head. I see the cover. It'll come to me in a second. Ooh, it almost came to me. It'll come. Anyway, Jacques Berliner Blau. Some of y'all may find it. Berlinerau. Jacques, like Jacques Cousteau. Jaquues. He's at Georgetown. Ooh, academic, confidential, something like that. Anyway, he says that one of the difficult things that we have now, that things are being recorded and those kind of things, the classroom is where a lot of unfortunate comments are made. He doesn't mean unfortunate comments in the sense that, oh, this is terrible. What he's saying is people talk because they're being vulnerable. The idea that everything come out of somebody's mouth in a learning environment is spot on. That's absurd. We're people talking. And he's writing this, Woodson's writing this before cancel culture. He says, I've committed some of these errors myself. In several chapters, moreover, he specifically points out, he's talking about himself, wherein he himself has strayed from the path of wisdom. This book then is not intended as a broadside against any particular person or class. You see that? But it is given as a corrective for methods which have not produced satisfactory results. Now, that may or may not be that entirely true, honestly. I'm going to resist the urge to get very deep into the introduction because we'll cover this next week, but I am going to go, I'm just going to page forward. Like I said, it's on the introduction itself is 6 pages, not quite 6 pages, but I'm going to go to page 12 in the book just for a second. He says, let me see. Page 11, bottom of the page, if you're following along now. if you rushed and got your copy off the shelf or went over to the other side of Knarrative and got it. This is in the introduction, page XI, Roman numerals. Weren't smart enough to have that base system until the Muslims came and taught them, but you know, that's a story for another day. Woodson writes, quote, highly educated, end quote, Negroes denounce persons who advocate for the Negro, a sort of education different in some respects from that now given the white man. Negroes who have been so long inconvenienced and denied opportunities for development are naturally afraid of anything that sounds like discrimination. In a sentence, Woodson is identifying the schizophrenia that comes with a lot of folk who say, well, integration is better. Integrated education is better. Why? On principle? No, we're not talking about inequitable resources or white nationalism or white supremacy. We're not talking about racist education. No, we're talking about black education. Well, we should educate our own. Yeah, no, you should have integration. Why? Well, you know, studies have shown, okay, who did the studies? And what were the questions? And what were the objectives? Woodson's telling you from experience and training that did y'all even stop to consider whether we should be educating our own, or are you so socialized by how you've been denied opportunities that you are naturally afraid of anything that sounds like discrimination? He's asking questions from 1933 that we have answered in 2022. He goes on and says they are anxious to have everything the white man has, even if it is harmful. Woodson continues and says the possibility of originality in the Negro, therefore, is discounted 100% to maintain a nominal equality. Did you even think about the originality of black folk? Now, mind you, some of these same people will then go write books. And I have all the books by this young brother. He's coined this term ratchetdemics. And it makes me bristle. I said, why are you calling this ratchetdemia? Because you're trying to make it sound sexy to children. I get it. And also people who pay for professional developments, because he wrote a whole book called How to Teach Black Folks for White Folks Who Teach in the Hood, or some kind of a riff on not Nikki Giovanni, but Ntozake Shange for colored girls who consider suicide. I mean, I got the rhythm, but to me, that's a useless text. And that's not a criticism of him. It's an observation of what Woodson is saying. The originality of black folk shouldn't be turned into fodder for a stereotype of black folk and white eyes, but we're not doing that. We're pouring clean glasses of water. This isn't a social structure facing conversation. This is a governance structure conversation, and it's drawn on people like Woodson. Woodson continues, if the whites decide to take up Mormonism, the Negroes must follow their lead. If the whites neglect such a study, then the Negroes must do likewise. He said, y'all just gonna do whatever they do. He goes on and says, the author, however, does not have such an attitude. Talking about himself. He considers the educational system as it is developed both in Europe and America an antiquated process which does not hit the mark, even in the case of the needs of the white man himself. You see what Woodson is doing there? This is before Paulo Freire. This is before radical emancipatory education. This is during the time that Thomas Dewey and them are talking about this, question of constructivism, and he's writing in a context where black thinkers are thinking along the lines of some of these quote unquote radical educators that you see quoted everywhere, except he's applying this concept to our people through his eyes. So he's saying here, this education system is failing white people. And here we are, people saying, wow, the education system in America is not good. Did y'all read The Miseducation of the Negro? No. Carr G. Woodson? Oh, yeah, I know Carr G. Woodson. You clearly don't. You know the name. You have him on t-shirt, but did you read what he said? He tried to tell y'all that in the 30s, during the Great Depression. Goes on and says, if the white man wants to hold on to it, let him do so. But the Negro, so far as he is able, should develop and carry out a program of his own. That's critical. You see what Woodson is doing there? Woodson, living in Jim Crow, living in apartheid America, and by the way, now we're gonna talk back to Woodson. We're gonna have a conversation with each other. The gendered language in here fails. He is taking as a universal here. Gender, we got to rethink that. Obviously, Woodson don't have any problem with that. But the point is that in this context, what he's saying is he has given us what we now may use the label social structure, who are Africans to other people, governance structure, who are Africans to each other. He wasn't using that language, but the sentiment is there. This is the reason we made Carr G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro the first lesson in the Philadelphia curriculum we wrote. We wrote a whole lesson on Woodson to have the young people anchor themselves in this. Woodson is basically saying, hey, we all live in the same country, but if y'all want to go and jump down in that hole, no problem. Hold on, people. What? Y'all gonna follow them just because you think you want anything they got, right? Did you even think what was in that hole? Pause. So you see the timeliness. We continue. And now the next paragraph is where we've heard this many times. If we don't have a back door, we'll make one. This is the quote that we normally see from Woodson. And again, this week isn't for doing the line read. We'll do this next week. But I wanted to mention one other thing. Let's see. All right. Finally, we'll stop with this. 8:57. Good. We'll start right at 9. The difficulty is that the educated Negro is compelled to live and move among his own people whom he has been taught to despise. As a rule, therefore, the educated Negro prefers to buy his fruit from a white grocer because he has been taught that the Negro is not clean. It does not matter how often a Negro washes his hands, then, he cannot clean them. And it does not matter how often a white man uses his hands, he cannot soil them. The educated Negro, moreover, is disinclined to take part in Negro business because he has been taught in economics that Negroes cannot operate in this particular space. The educated Negro gets less and less pleasure out of the Negro church, not on account of its primitiveness and increasing corruption, but because of his preference for the seats of righteousness controlled by his oppressor. This has been his education, and nothing else can be expected of him. If the educated Negro could go off and be white, he might be happy. But only a mulatto now and then can do this. Again, this is the language of the time. It's a little harsh, but think beyond the context in that sense and think about the underlying principle. And that doesn't mean we don't engage it. This is the beauty of this conversation. We don't have any ideological rigidity. We're doing this together. Final sentence for tonight. He says, the large majority of this class then must go through life denouncing white people because they are trying to run away from the blacks and decrying the blacks because they are not white. Questions for next week. As you're reading, we come to really get into the guts of it. Because tonight wasn't it. This is just like introducing the concept. And I'm going to scroll through the chat a little bit as you come back, Urias, as we get ready to have our conversations to see how people are kind of responding, thinking along with just tonight, because this is brand new to everybody. Came out of my mouth. I ain't say that, I said something to Karen, but I didn't say anything to anybody else. The questions for next week, as we're thinking about, and this will guide us a little bit as we go on. We're going to make up new questions as we do. Why did Woodson do what he did? In his life, generally, for sure, but in this specific book, ask that of every chapter. Why did Woodson write this? Why did he do what he did? And does this matter to us now? And if it does matter, what part of it matters? And why should it matter? What's left out? What will we add, change? What has changed? But that first question, why did he do this? Why did he write this? What is he saying? Why did he write this? So we'll start with that.